Hello guys, it's part 2 of the Berlin Blockade today. We're looking at what were the results of the Berlin Blockade. We've got 2 learning objectives: to understand how the West resolved the Berlin Blockade and to understand the consequences of the Berlin Blockade as well. So you have got a written task to do on the worksheet in Google Classroom and a quiz to complete as well. So please complete them when I prompt you to during the video. Read the questions carefully with the quiz. You only get 1 attempt. And any questions you might have, feel free to contact me, gbrown@stopsleyhighschool.co.uk. So, where we left it, 24th of June, Stalin had blockaded Berlin. And this meant that West Germany could not provide supplies to West Berlin. They calculated West Berlin had 36 days of supplies left until there was nothing in the city. And this meant Truman had to take action straight away. And it looks like Truman's got 2 available options, really. Let's have a look at them. Option 1 is you just say, no. You just drive through the blockade. You force your way into the Soviet section of Germany. Well, pause the video here. What are the advantages and disadvantages of doing that, do you think? Okay, let's have a look at them. So, what are the positives with this? First of all, this sends a clear message to the USSR. Also, America has the atomic bomb, which the Soviets know about. So actually, at this time, it looks like the Americans are on top, that the Soviets won't be able to stand up to them. America has too much military might, too much financial might at this time. It also shows Truman would intend to keep his word with the Truman Doctrine. He had said, I will stop the spread of communism, and actually he's doing just that. So what are the negatives? Well, first of all, this is very aggressive. It looks like it's going to create a poor impression of the USA worldwide, and it also backs up Stalin's claim of the USA trying to control Europe, because that's exactly what they'd be doing here. And actually, can you be sure at this point that the USSR does not have the atomic bomb? Don't forget, the Iron Curtain's up, there's a lot of work going on in secret, no one's quite sure what's going on at this point. What a disaster it would be if the USSR did have the atomic bomb as well. Okay, so that's clearly maybe not the best option. Let's look at option 2. Withdraw and give up all of Berlin to Stalin. Pause the video here. What would be the positives and negatives of doing this? Just saying to Stalin, okay, Berlin's yours, it's fine. So, the positives would include, it's the most peaceful option. There's not really any chance of war here at all. You're just backing down. It solves the problem of Berlin, which is clearly upsetting Stalin. It's in the Soviet section anyway. The USSR had lost millions of lives liberating Berlin, so maybe this is the best option. But there are negatives to this, of course, and that can include it undermines what Truman had said just a few years previously in the Truman Doctrine. Truman had said he would protect any country under the threat of communism, and yet he was backing down once being tested with Berlin. There's also no guarantee that Stalin would rest once he'd taken Berlin. It's called the domino theory, where countries fall one after another. So it's quite possible that actually if Stalin wins this round, he would then try to take the rest of Germany as well and keep spreading communism. And again, we call that the domino effect. Like a line of dominoes being knocked down. It's the same thing with countries becoming communist. So this isn't really a standout option either. And it looks like these are the only 2 options available, but Truman argued there was a third argument, a third possibility. Now, Truman said, look, the roads have been blocked, so we cannot, and the canals have been blocked, so we cannot, and the trains have been blocked, but we can find another way of getting the supplies in, and that's via the air. We could use planes, and we could just fly over those blockades on the rail, fly over those blockades on the road. And this was called the Berlin Airlift. So, option 3, let's discuss this one. Just fly everything over that the city needs. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of this method? Okay, so the positives of this. Well, this isn't breaking the blockade at all. You're just flying over it, and therefore it puts all the pressure back on Stalin to see how he responds. It makes the USA look strong, and that's in 2 senses here, both politically, because you're sending a clear message that you are standing up to communism. Also financially as well. This is very expensive, and actually you're showing the financial might of the USA at this time. So what about the negatives? First of all, Stalin could still shoot the planes down. There is no guarantee Stalin will let the planes fly over peacefully, and so this could provoke a war. Also, logistically and financially, this was an enormous operation. There's a reason why Tesco's doesn't really fly goods over. They use those big lorries. That's because it's so expensive to do. And logistically, you would need so many aircraft to do this. Okay, so we've just seen that neither option's great. Let's look at the blockade a little bit more then. So they calculated that 1,300 flights were needed to land in West Berlin every 24 hours. That is a huge amount, and it basically means every 3 minutes a plane would have to take off and land from an airport. A plane would have just 30 minutes to unload before it had to take off again, and then fly back to reload. So when we think about the amount of staff needed and equipment needed to do this, it's ginormous. It really is. You need a huge amount of planes. You need a huge amount of pilots, people to repair the planes, people to fuel the planes, people to repair the airports. It's a huge amount needed. But there's also not enough airports or proper runways anyway. And if we want an example of this, fields would have to be used that would require repairing after takeoff every single time. So you're going to have people run over into the field and start to repatch the grass again. So neither of these three options looks good, does it? You can either drive through, you could let them have Berlin, or you could attempt the blockade. Now, task one, I'd like you to know, regardless of what you know is going to happen, I'd like you to have a think. Now, if you were Truman at the time, which method would you have picked for responding to the blockade? Would you have gone through it? Would you have withdrawn from Berlin completely? Or would you have attempted the airlift? I'd like you to write me a paragraph explaining why you've picked that selection and tell me what the advantages are. So I'm looking for a paragraph here. Do not just write 2 lines. Go back and use the purple slides if you need to get some information. Pause the video here to complete that task on the worksheets and then press play to continue. Okay, so they obviously attempted the airlift. If you've not worked it out by now, then that's a bit worrying. June 26th, 1948. The first planes flew over Berlin. Now, the Soviet planes would buzz the USA planes. And what I mean by that is they would fly very close to them to try to distract them. But there was no shooting. August 12th, 1948. The airlift is now picking up speed and it's achieved its daily target for the first time. This shows that the airlift was working, this method was working, and you could get enough goods to West Berlin. By December the 31st, 1948, a new record, 6,000 tons of supplies were dropped daily on Berlin. So the blockade obviously was not working. It was completely failing. The airlift was working. As a result, Stalin looked weaker every day the blockade continued. Stalin had hoped, it's coming to winter, I'm not negotiating yet, we're going to wait until winter, hopefully it'll be freezing cold, the planes won't be able to take off, the weather will be awful. But it was relatively mild. There were some issues still, some planes did crash. As a result, the USA did have to work harder to make these flights work, but the airlift continued well into winter and beyond. Stalin's clearly not prepared to shoot the planes down as well and go to war at this time. And also, what's interesting is this event had united the Germans of West Germany and West Berlin and the allies of the USA, Britain and France. Now, these guys had been shooting at each other a few years before in World War II, and yet now they were working together to make sure that communism didn't spread. Now, this is obviously not the effect that Stalin wanted, and so May the 12th, 1949, the blockade was removed. So, just a few statistics about the blockade. There's some more that I could have brought in, but I think this sums it up quite well. Now, that blockade lasted for a total of 15 months, with 2.4 million tons of food and fuel dropped into the city. Tragically, 79 Allied troops did lose their lives. It was usually in plane crashes, if you imagine how tired these pilots must have been, and sometimes how heavy the planes were. What I found fascinating was the total length of the flights of all of the planes together over the blockade, 92 million miles, was pretty much identical to the same distance as the Earth to the Sun. So it shows just the effort that the Allied forces had to put in to keep West Berlin supplied. So, what were the consequences of the blockade once it had been lifted? The first one is, this is a clear victory for the West. The blockade was removed by Stalin. He had blinked first. He had backed down. It showed he was not prepared to go to war with the USA. Now, this is a huge victory for capitalism. It's a huge victory for America. It shows politically they will stand up to communism, and they've won. Financially, it shows just how impressively rich they are at this time as well, that they could afford to do an operation like this. And they use this as propaganda in the Cold War. Number 2, Berlin remains divided as a result. It's still split between West Berlin and East Berlin. The Allied troops have not left West Berlin. And so this would keep causing tension. We're going to keep coming back to this fact, because actually it means that people in East Berlin can go to West Berlin for a better way of life, for more money, for better paid jobs under a capitalist system. It means there's a gap in the Iron Curtain. And this will keep causing tension for over the next 10 years between the USA and USSR. The Soviets want that gap in the Iron Curtain closed. They want to make sure that people cannot leave East Berlin to go to West Berlin. It also means that West Berlin remains this little symbol of capitalism, of hope and freedom behind the Iron Curtain. You can see it there on the map, can't you? You can see the red communist section of Germany, and just in that, in the middle of it, just a few little colours. You've got your green, yellow and blue, a bit of capitalism there behind the Iron Curtain, a symbol of freedom. And Germany itself would remain divided as well between West Germany and East Germany. And both sides felt they were the true Germany. They refused to acknowledge the other as a country. So West Germany didn't acknowledge East Germany as a separate country, and East Germany didn't acknowledge West Germany as a separate country. And this would continue until the 1970s. And the final consequence is, as a result, tension increased, which is a theme we've seen throughout the start of this course. We have to take this in consideration here. Stalin has just tried to attempt to starve an entire part of a city. The West European countries realised that Stalin was a threat, communism was a threat, and their best chance of defeating this threat was by working together. And so, as a result, even before the blockade finished, April 1949, an alliance was formed between the USA, Canada, and 11 other European countries. Now, this was called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Still going today. It's the one that Trump didn't want to put money into. And it meant that if one country was under attack, the others would all join in to support them. So, for example, here, if France was under attack by communism, then actually the USA, Canada, and West Europe would all work together to protect France. They are all going to form an alliance. This means it's far less appealing for Stalin to try to turn one of these countries communist as a result, because he knows if he deals with one of the countries in NATO, he's got to deal with all of them. And as you can imagine, Stalin viewed NATO as a huge threat. He felt that West Europe was forming an alliance, they were a threat to him. And so they responded by conducting the Warsaw Pact in 1955. The Warsaw Pact is basically the opposite of NATO. It's an alliance for just communist countries rather than capitalist. And you can see on the map what they were like in reds there. So essentially you've got Europe and USA and Canada now split into two. The blue for capitalism and the red for communism. And it was the same thing again in that sense that if one country under communism was threatened by a capitalist country, that the others would all join in to help. So we've got two huge alliances causing tension at this time. Okay, so task 2, you've got a brief quiz to complete now on the consequences of the Berlin Blockade. Please, could you complete that? Make sure you give it a good read for each question because you only get one attempt. The blue slides will help if you need to go back, and then press play to conclude this lesson. And that is it for today. Thank you very much as always, guys. Please make sure you submit your work so that we can see it. Please make sure you have written a good amount of detail for the paragraph. As always, thank you for completing this lesson today. Please look after yourself. Get some fresh air and exercise where you can. Any questions you might have, feel free to contact me, gbrown@stopsyhighschool.co.uk. Take care and I'll see you soon. All the best. Bye-bye.